Hey there, and good evening. I've spent a few days with the new Qubit Nautilus and have had a really good time with it, so I figured it would be fun to do a really informal and laid-back patch from scratch video, and maybe we could talk about some other stuff too. I can tell you about this tea I'm drinking, and I'll probably talk about Cormac McCarthy because that is relevant to synthesis, of course. But first, maybe like an overview. I'm going to be using Just Friends, the Whimsical Raps Mannequins module as a synth voice. And I'm going to be sequencing that from the Monome Teletype, which is why this synthesizer has a computer keyboard attached to it. We'll keep things pretty surface level. We're not going to do like a deep explorational dive on any of these modules. But what we will do is kind of move left to right and talk about what is happening and why. It's ginger tea, by the way. We've got all 6 individual outputs of Just Friends going into nearness, and this is just a stereo mixer. So like the closer an input is to the middle, the closer it will be to the middle of the stereo field. And the further this way it is, the further it will be toward this output in terms of its weighting. So we'll go ahead and connect that to Nautilus. I think we're going to skip Cold Mac for now. Nothing is happening yet because first what we need to do is use Teletype to put Just Friends into synth mode, and we'll do that with this command, jf.mode1. Okay, little pop there. Now we are in synth mode, and essentially this module is going to act like a 6-voice polysynth from here on out. So, what is Teletype? Teletype is basically like a little computer with a super truncated programming language. And the reason why it's truncated is because you essentially get 8 scripts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in a scene, and you can put code in these, but not a whole lot of code. And more or less what you can do is create control voltage, create gates. You can take triggers or gates into these top inputs to launch a script. And well, I mean, to put it bluntly, I'm terrible at teletype. I am the world's worst teletyper, but that should give you hope because if this goes somewhere interesting, then maybe teletype isn't that scary and you should check it out and bounce some ideas off of me and other friends in the comments. It's a lot of fun once you kind of wrap your brain around what is going on. But so all of the commands I'm going to be entering into it will have to do with talking to Just Friends and making it do pretty synth things, which, by the way, how are they talking to each other? Well, they're connected inside the case here, behind the panels, via a protocol called I2C. It's basically just 3 little DuPont connector wires that go from the back of Teletype to the back of Just Friends, so they're able to communicate with each other without being patched. So when I type stuff into Teletype and Just Friends does something, that's why. Don't be confused. The cables are run around the back. But okay, yeah, so some housekeeping things first. First thing I want to do is in the Metro script, which is like a clocked script that is always running unless we turn it off, is we want to say, let's set our Metro to 96 BPM. Okay, so now this Metro script is running at 96 beats per minute. We're just going to tell it to send a trigger out of the trigger output 1 every cycle. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to go ahead and preemptively clock Nautilus with Teletype. So these 2 guys are synced up now. We'll jump over to live mode, which is just like a dashboard we can use. I'm going to turn on this little variable dashboard so you can see what's happening here in a minute. But the first thing I'm going to do is tell Teletype that I want to operate in like scale mode, essentially. And I want to use a root note of 3, which is, I think, would be E flat. I might be wrong, sorry. And let's do a scale of 0, which is Ionian. So after I hit enter there, we've basically set up a quantizer so that when we enter intervals here in a little bit, they'll all be quantized to that scale and to that root node. If you have never imbibed pure ginger tea, you haven't lived, man. It's a trip. It's really wonderful. All right. So now what we're going to do is jump into script 1. And the first thing we want to do here is I want to show you just kind of how this works. I'm going to tell Just Friends, JF, that I want it to sound a note, and I want it to basically, every time I issue this command, move through its voices, round robin style. And we're going to use the scale that we just set up, and I want to, let's just go with 1, the first interval, and volts 5. The V here usually stands for volts, but long story short, it kind of translates to a velocity control for the voices. So that is like active. Now we can trigger scripts on Teletype a variety of different ways, but a really immediate way is by using the function keys. So if I hit function 1 here, we hear a little note. I'm going to turn this down. And as you see these LEDs lighting up, it's cycling through all 6 voices. And because those individual outs are going into this kind of stereo mixer thing, nearness, it's throwing them all around the stereo field. It's all the same note, which is, I guess, cool, but more notes would be neat too. So, let's assign a variable x to the range of -12, which would be 1 octave down, to 15, which would be a little bit more than an octave up. So now every time we hit function 1, or essentially every time script 1 is run or called, x is going to get a new number. I'm going to go back to this variable dashboard to show you. That time, when I hit function 1, it assigned the number 4. So the next time we trigger a voice, it's going to play the 4th interval. Nope, I did something wrong. Oh, yeah. I forgot to change the 1 here to x. Now it'll grab our x variable and play that note. Now we're getting somewhere cool, right? This big time knob here on Just Friends will control the decay envelope, the length of the note. We're kind of just doing a sine wave thing, but we could change that up really quickly. We'll keep it siney for now. Okay, so what we have is really quickly in like 2 lines of code, maybe a few more, we have built a fairly generative synth voice that is operating within the constraints of the system we've set up, like the root note and the scale that we have specified, but it's kind of doing its own thing. It's randomly assigning a note every time that command is called. Now we could continue firing that by hand, but we're going to explore a more fun an interesting way to do that with Nautilus, which is a delay module. So how are we going to do that? You might be asking yourself. Well, we'll get there, but first, let's talk about Nautilus. I turn the mix up here. Essentially, Nautilus is a digital delay that has up to 4 taps per channel. It's true stereo. It doesn't like sum to mono or anything. And in fact, I'll go ahead and hit a note here and you'll notice that it kind of stays where it enters the stereo field. Which is great. T. We can control how many taps Nautilus is using with the sensor knob here. Go all the way up. It's a bunch of taps. You may notice that they're evenly spaced right now. We can change that. This little guy right here. As we turn this knob clockwise, the taps spread out. The resolution knob here is essentially a clock divider or multiplier. To the left, it's going to divide, slow everything down. And clockwise, it's going to multiply. Which can be pretty wild. How great is this user interface with the LEDs and the kelp? I love it. Okay, so I mentioned a few minutes ago that there was an interesting way to drive this sequence with Nautilus. The sonar output can be configured a couple of different ways. It can be a CV generator, but right now it's configured as a gate generator. And the way they describe it, and sorry if I botched this, but essentially every time the delay is pinged, it's going to send a gate out. And I think that means that, if you imagine a delay existing in like a room with 4 walls, every time your sound hits one of the walls, it ricochets back toward you, and that's what you hear as a delay tap, as feedback, and the number of times that you hear it is the number of times it bounces off the wall. And I believe what's happening, and I haven't scoped this or anything yet, but every time it bounces off one of those walls, we're going to get a trig out this output. So let's turn this back down, the dispersal. So if we hit go on a couple of notes and then plug this gate into the script 1 input on Teletype, which is going to fire off script 1 every time it gets a gate or a trig, it should just kind of start singing on its own. And it does. All right, so now that that is in control of the sequence, got both hands and we can start patching and exploring Nautilus a little bit more. Let's slow the sequence down with the resolution knob, because as we use a clock divider on the taps, which we'll spread out here, the sequence will slow down too and become more sparse. So let's give it a longer tail. Now, so far, we have been exploring the taps themselves, but we're going to jump in and look at the different feedback modes and delay modes and a few nice little touches that Qubit has included on Nautilus. The first one is the reverse knob. This is going to control what percentage of the taps are playing backwards. Which is super nice. Let's spread those taps out a little more. There are 4 different delay modes that Nautilus can operate in. Blue mode is kind of like standard. Let's see what the green mode is. I think it's Doppler mode, right? Yeah, okay, so it's Doppler mode, I'm remembering. Which essentially means in the blue mode, the bass mode, the module will like essentially not introduce pitch shifting as you change the delay time, but it will in this green mode. So when we change the division that it's operating under, that cool little whipsaw sound will be introduced. And we'll go to the feedback taps as well. This orange mode is a shimmer up, which is lovely. And the purple mode is a shimmer down, octave down, a D shimmer, if you will, which I think is beautiful. Let's jump back to blue. There are also several different modes of feedback. Right now, we're just in the bass mode. Blue is kind of the initial setting for all of these. Green is a ping pong. So, earlier I showed you how the Just Friends voices, kind of that Nautilus respected their place in the stereo field. The green feedback mode, they'll ping pong back and forth. So something that enters on the right will ping pong to the left and back to the right, so on and so forth. Ping pong mode has been my favorite so far in exploring. The next one is Cascade, which I need to spend more time with and learn more about. I know that it sounds great, but I'm not really sure what it's doing. And then the last one is called Adrift. I'm gonna jump back to ping pong mode. I like that one a lot. So there's some other fun things we can do with Nautilus. Let's talk about chroma and depth. There's a whole suite of effects that you can apply to the feedback only, and those are controlled. You can scroll through them with the chroma knob. The depth is all the way down. Essentially, you can control how much of each effect you want coloring your signal. But I wanted to show you, if you look at the base of the kelp here, it's going to change color to show you what effect you're applying. And as you apply more of it, the kelp will change to that color. So like this one is a low pass filter. So we turn it up, more of the kelp will become blue. So that's applying a low pass filter only to the repeats. And then green is a high pass filter. which can be super useful, kind of cleaning up a muddy voice. Next are some digital artifact noises, and I'm obsessed with this one. I love it. It's very data bender. God, that is so good. And it stays in the feedback path. You can kind of hear it dying out now, even though I've turned down the depth. Orange is a really gorgeous saturation. I love this one too. This kind of turquoise. Is a nice, more aggressive saturation. And then the red. Hey, let's go there. Let's just rip it. Red kelp sounds like that, which is a vibe. And go back to that little harmonic distortion. Yeah, that's nice. So I want to, in our sequence here, add some modulation on CV1. I want it to be a random voltage between 0 and 5. I'm going to set the slew time to a half second. So it's kind of like a sample and hold, a smooth, random. Actually, I changed my mind. I'm going to do that with this little expansion that can go -5 to +5. TO. Okay. So back in script 1. So you've got kind of a random voltage between -5 and +5 volts molted up here. And I'm going to plug that in to the depth of that effect. Pretty nice, but let's attenuate it. Let's go -5 to 2. And that way, if we park it here, it'll turn itself all the way down and a little bit up. The other thing I want to do is instead of issuing this command every time trigger 1 gets pinged here, let's introduce an element of probability. So now we're going to give this a 50% chance of happening. That's going to introduce some more randomness into this sequence. I'm also off screen jacked into a Qubit Aurora reverb. If you'll excuse me for a second, I'm going to go turn up the mix on that. Now we're kind of beat booping. Let's send this to the sensor's CV input, which will affect the number of delay lines that are active. The other thing I want to do is say the probability of 20% send a pulse out of trigger out 2. I'm going to send that to the freeze input of Nautilus, which will, well, you probably get what that will do. It'll freeze the buffer. So every now and then, when you see this little snowflake go white, the buffer's frozen, and a trigger or gate will flip-flop that. Okay, now that we've got something nice cooking, let me recommend that you pick up a copy of Cormac McCarthy's Outer Dark. I kind of unintentionally started with later Cormac. I've read The Road, probably like a lot of you, No Country, Border Trilogy, Blood Meridian, all of that kind of era of Cormac McCarthy. But for whatever reason, I had never jumped into his earlier stuff, and I believe Outer Dark is his second novel, and it's really, really great. And the thing I would point out about it that I'm really enjoying is, if you've never read Cormac McCarthy, he doesn't use quotation marks to denote dialogue, so you kind of just have to intuit when somebody is speaking or not, but it totally works because he's such a master of switching back and forth between prose and dialogue. It's brilliant because it absolutely works, and you know when someone's talking and you know when he's describing something, even though the kind of grammatical conventions that you would expect from a novel are not being used. I know that's a small thing, but it's something I noticed and really appreciated. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful writing. I don't really tend to care what Cormac McCarthy novels are about because I would read like the back of a toilet paper box written by Cormac McCarthy. The way that he writes is beautiful and it will expand your mind. Go pick up a copy if you can at a local bookstore. I was not able to. I tried, I promise. And here's the other thing, kids. Read a book on paper, right? I'm going to be an old man for a second. Holding a book and reading it on paper and touching it and smelling the way that a book smells, you know what I'm talking about. is a special experience, and it might not be one that we have forever. So today, go buy a book on paper and read it on paper. I have a Kindle too. I do that from time to time, but I've really enjoyed the tactile experience of reading this book in print. I think I'm going to be done talking, and I'm going to swivel this mic away and just spend a few more minutes kind of modifying the sequence and playing. So if you have something else to do, if you're at work or whatever, you can leave it on. It's safe. I'll just do an ambient jam for a while. We'll see you next time. Bye.